Hey, welcome everyone. Hey, this is a podcast that explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspective, societal impacts, or related topics. This podcast often features discussions with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I'm your host, Al Richards. And today, with Brayden Robinson, we are going to discuss peer support. And I've really been looking forward to this show because I think peer support is very, very important. Because Brayden will also tell you, and I'm sure he'll say it here during the show, we all need some support. You know, they say the opposite of addiction is connection. We all need something or someone there to help us along this journey. So, Brayden, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us, man. Just really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm super excited to be here and to get to talk about peer support. It's been a huge, impactful part of my recovery and my life, both professionally and personally. So I'm excited to be able to get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear how you went, how it got you there, right? Your journey that got you to that point. Because I did a talk up in Park City at the Wellness Alliance about a month ago, a month and a half ago. And during my talk, I was letting people know, and I shared this on the first show this morning too, that I didn't pick this path. God chose this path for me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy if you go back and you even hear like my story where it led me to this day. And you know, when I first started doing this podcast, I'm going, man, I don't know how long this show's going to last because it seemed like everyone's story was the same, right? I fell into drugs and alcohol at age 11 or 12 or 13, and this happened, that happened, this happened. And it still took another couple months before my light finally went off. It's everyone's journey is different. Everyone has such a different journey and what got them to where they're at today. Did you find the same for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I relate to the experience of hearing many different recovery stories and them being sounding very similar. And then, when you dig into the details and the unique experiences of the mental health aspects of addiction and recovery, right? And getting into recovery and having to navigate trauma and different kinds of mental health diagnoses and things like that. That's where I think the unique differences in people's recovery journeys can get really beautiful and inspiring because while the general track of recovery is in addiction is similar, right? The unique aspects of finding recovery and what it takes to maintain and keep recovery for the long term, I think is there's a million different ways to do it. And that's a really beautiful thing that so many people that are still currently struggling and hearing these stories can really uh, latch onto because my story is going to resonate so much differently with someone uh, than anyone else's story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, most definitely. So, I mean, what got you on this path? I mean, I'm guessing because I haven't heard your story that
yeah.
somewhere along your line of life,
Mhm.
something took you off in a whole different direction, and before you knew it, it
Totally.
had a hold of you pretty strong. And then, of course, like a lot of us, we don't know where to go from or go where to go to from there.
Totally. Yeah, I mean you hit the nail on the head. Yeah. Just I'll share a little bit of my addiction story and my background growing up, and how I really found recovery. And so for me, I mean, I was born and raised here in Utah with a single parent household, and pretty much since I was born, I remember, well, as far back as I can remember, struggling with connection to other people. And you mentioned earlier, the opposite of addiction is connection, right? So
Hmm.
I've even in recovery felt this challenge in connection, and so growing up, that manifested for me a lot in my social life. I tended to be I was a really smart kid. I was really good at school. Those kind of things came pretty easy to me. Had a lot of potential in that realm, but socially, I struggled to make friends. I tended to be a little bit awkward and shy, introverted. And so as a kid, I had a couple friends in the neighborhood, but I was never a big like social butterfly kind of person, right? Um, to complicate that, our family life wasn't awful or horrible by any means, but I had a single mom that wasn't around all the time because she was working and providing for us. I was much younger than my brothers, and so I kind of felt isolated even within my own home, having such an age gap with my brothers and my mom not being around. Um, as I got a little bit older, around 10, 11, 12, my dad, who I would see infrequently, left entirely, which really left what I now know to be one of my most significant traumas, which is like abandonment, and that kind of stuff from my father. Um, he left around that time. That's when I really started to kind of decline in my mental health as a youth. Because then I started to get into drinking, weed, smoking around the early teen years to try to cope with all of these things that I didn't know how to deal with, right? Like in my family home, we didn't talk about emotions. We didn't know the language to communicate around how to deal with these challenges I was having. And so the only thing that I could find once I got into like, junior high school years was substances. Um, my family, pretty much everybody in my family has dealt with addiction at one time or the other, and we're pretty fortunate that most of us have found recovery. We've lost a few of our family members, my dad and my uncle specifically, but I had all the warning signs. My mom told me we have this family history, and I just didn't heed that warning. Right, getting into high school, I started partying, and pretty much from day one, that alcohol sparked something inside of me that sparks in many people around. I was pretty much instantly over utilizing it to cope with my life and my emotions and my feelings. Um, I also got into other substances in the party scene as well, but alcohol was always my biggest demon to fight, as it has been with my whole family. And so going forward from there, I moved out with a bunch of my friends. We had like 10 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, just the crazy party scene, every single night, trying to hold down a job. And I had no interest in college or anything like that. But I ended up grabbing onto to a passion for cooking, and became a chef in my young adulthood. And that really, I think, both kept me out of a lot of trouble and got me into a lot of trouble. If anyone's ever worked in the restaurant scene, it can be pretty chaotic and lots of drug use and alcohol use. Um, so it was around here in my early adulthood that I ended up, I got my first DUI, out of two, and my underage drinking tickets, just my first interactions with the law enforcement. Um, and in dealing with that, starting to recognize that, maybe mom was right. Maybe I've got this thing that I don't have the ability to have a healthy relationship with drinking. I decided to dive fully into my chef career and moved out to Park City and Heber City area, uh, pursuing the big fancy hotels up there. Kind of were told to me to be kind of the pinnacle of chef work in Utah. And I was really successful. I mean, the thing with me is that anything I kind of put my mind to and I really work towards, I've always been successful at. And then partying and alcohol and drugs has always kind of knocked me off of that path, in many different ways. And so I worked up in Park City for 5 years and had periods of sobriety. Typically after I would get in trouble, I would have mandated periods of sobriety, right? And I would do really well. I would feel good. And then I have had this cycle of slowly trickling back into drinking. Um, and so eventually, though, kind of fast forwarding a little bit without getting into the gritty details, I was kind of at my worst. I had my second DUI. I was really drinking heavily every single day. It was complicating my work life, which at that time was the most important thing to me. I was going to be this big Gordon Ramsay, chef figure. Take over the culinary world was my dream, and I was starting to get in trouble. I was at risk of losing my job, and one night, I don't have any recollection of this because I was heavily intoxicated, but apparently I finally gave in to my mom and letting her take me to detox. And by the time she got there, I'd already forgotten that. And so I had locked myself in the room, just pounding booze, just really. I was also dealing with severe mental health aspects. I was suicidal, and it was just a really all bad situation. But somehow, and I still don't know to this day how she got into my room, in my apartment. She got in, got me into detox, and that was kind of the first step towards eventually finding recovery, was getting into a medical detox facility, and having a few days and some medical assistance, because alcohol detox, as I'm sure many people know, is very dangerous, in getting a little bit more stable. I left behind the apartment and the job. I kind of no call, no showed, and called them a few days later and just said, hey, this is what's going on. Like, I need to do what I need to do. And started trying to focus on myself, and initially was basically white knuckling my sobriety and my recovery. I wasn't doing any recovery, any meetings, any 12-step, anything, just staying with family, trying to focus on doing okay. And that worked okay for a couple months. And then it didn't, right? I slipped back into it again. And this last story is one of the most impactful of my life. And my parents, in getting me in a detox, letting me stay at their house, had delayed. They had recently gotten married. It's my mom and my stepdad had recently gotten married and had delayed their honeymoon in order to take care of me. And they eventually were able to go ahead and do that. And that week was the last hardcore bender that I had in my life. I didn't last 8 hours of them leaving before I was at the liquor store, and I was kind of blacked out for the whole week. Chaos ensued throughout the week, with my other family members locally trying to help me out, finding out that I was drinking while they were gone, and so on and so forth, right? They didn't find out. They were expecting me to go pick them up, but I had an interlock device on my car, which saved my life, on many occasions, for sure. I'm grateful for it now, but eventually they're on the flight. I'm trying to figure out how to go pick them up, and I can't. I kind of had to accept my fate and realize that I had let them down again, right? And so I'm sitting there. I sent them the text that they didn't get until they landed. And I'm just sitting there awaiting, the consequences of my actions. And one of my brothers, who I wasn't always the closest with, I love him dearly, but we kind of saw the world a little bit differently. He's very religious, and I'm very much not. He sent me a text and kind of lit me up because he had to leave a family party to go pick them up, and he was kind of tired of my bullshit, and he lit me up in a pretty big way. And that, for whatever reason, that hit me just right in the heart, right in the soul, that I had affected my family in such an extreme way. And so while I was waiting for them to kind of come home, for the first time in my entire life, I'd never done this. I'd always hidden alcohol everywhere, right? Always had my stashes. I grabbed everything that I knew was there, and I poured it down the drain, threw the bottles outside in the dumpster, and didn't have anything on me, and just waited for them to come home. And that was March 29th of 2018. And March 30th is what I consider to be my recovery date, where the next morning we went up to a place called Valley Camp up in Eden, Utah, which is where I found 12-step recovery initially, and a sponsor, and started getting into recovery that way. And yeah, I mean, that experience still to this day is one of my most profound spiritual experiences, because I had never even considered doing that before. I had never really recognized the true destruction that I was causing, in that time in my life. I knew that I was hurting people, but I figured the biggest person I was affecting was myself, and that was it, right? And I was okay with that. I had accepted that early on in life. And so now I have this big, profound experience. I'm in this place, Valley Camp. Well, I wasn't living there, but I was going there for meetings all the time. I found my sponsor. I did the steps, and ultimately ended up sponsoring other guys there and finding service. And I think for me, service is what is the guiding light for the rest of my recovery that I'll explain, right? It's really being able to help other people that has held me down in recovery, even in the bad times. And so I get on the board at Valley Camp, and I'm being of service there for the first few years. That was kind of my focus. And then I find peer support. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life right now in recovery. I tried to do the chef thing to make money, but it was chaotic and stressful. It didn't fit. And so I eventually find my brother was working at First Step House here in Salt Lake City as a peer support. And I just kind of took a leap of faith, left behind my career of almost 10 years, and got an entry level desk job at First Step House, and that was my first introduction to kind of human services, peer support, all that kind of stuff, and I just fell in love with it immediately.
Wow. So can I pause you just for a second?
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
going just stepping back just a little bit, you know, when you said you're sitting there waiting for your parents to come home and waiting for the consequences, have you been able to put your finger on it? What light went off? What snapped in you that moment to go, I mean, I know you said, here I did it again. I let him down once again. You know,
Mhm.
was it that, or you mentioned something spiritual, like something happened to you that just finally opened your eyes and said, you know what, I'm done with this. This is the direction I'm going to go.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've thought a lot about that over the years, and I don't know that I have like an objective answer. I think it was a lot of things. I think it was exhaustion that I knew for many years that I was going to die from this, and I had accepted that. But I think in that moment it became very real. It wasn't abstract, me not being around anymore. It was real. Like, I'm not going to be here, um, for me and my family. And like my brother's text, my family's messages, our talks when they did get home, made that pretty clear that they were on the verge of kicking me out, me becoming homeless because of this experience, which fortunately I never did have to experience, because I found recovery at that point. But I think it was just a culmination of all of these factors, and finding I didn't know it at the time, but I found a spiritual program in 12 step in Alcoholics Anonymous, and got in touch with spirituality because I've never been a very spiritual person. And so I do consider that kind of a spiritual experience where something inside me just made me make a choice,
Yeah.
that ultimately led me down a path that now I understand as being in recovery. But in the moment, I couldn't make the choice that I had been making the week prior. I couldn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. And I have to agree with you. Something spiritual was there,
Yeah.
you know, to, for you to decide, hey, this is not really the direction I want to go. I mean, I accepted death at one time, but now I don't want to,
Yeah.
and I've got to go a different direction. And I am a firm believer too that whether it's God, who I call my higher power, or it's our angels or our Holy Spirit, whatever, starts setting out the pieces for us to follow. Right here, here's a piece. Go pick it up, and this will lead you to another, and this will lead you to another, which,
Totally.
you know, you stop there, you got this desk job, and now you started really falling in love with being involved in this recovery community.
Totally. Yeah. 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 And so to pick up there, I got that desk job. I started exploring school. I wanted to make something, a new career. And so I knew I was always good at school. So that was kind of my first reaction. So I started at Weber State, actually in sports journalism, because at the time, and I still am a diehard Jazz fan, Utah Jazz fan. Um, Found out pretty quickly that wasn't the move. And when I was moving back, I moved back closer to home to attend Weber State. I got a job at Davis Behavioral Health in Kaysville as a peer support specialist. That was my first actual peer support specialist job. And I did the 40-hour peer support training. And that entire week, I knew I was in the right spot. Like, this is like one of the stones that you talked about, right? Like, something guided me to this point. My initial thought was to go to Weber and do sports journalism, and I'd end up in this peer support job, which introduced me to social work, which is what I ended up studying. And since then, I've been a peer support specialist, for 5.5 years now, um, in a variety of different roles that I can talk about. But yeah, for the next few years, I was doing peer support work, working individually with people, in kind of more of a clinical setting outside of what I was used to. Because 12 step is essentially peer support as well. It's one person helping another, right? And that's the magic
Mhm.
of it. Peer support in my work today is like a certification and a workforce and a job. But peer support really has been around for centuries. As long as human beings have been around, we've been supporting each other. And so, that's the beauty in it, is it's really just one person helping the other, with their lived experience. And for me, it's mental health, addiction, suicidality, just all the things in that realm. Um, but it really, peer support is much broader than that in the grand scheme of things, which is really cool. Um, but yeah, so got into school, I started studying, and I'm working at Davis Behavioral as a peer support, and I loved it. I was running groups, um, facilitating activities. We did the sober softball thing. We had a team for us and our peers that we were supporting. We did volleyball, water events. There's all kinds of incredible things. And the thing that I'm most grateful for with peer support, because at this time I was kind of experiencing what I've talked to a lot of people about, this kind of year and a half, 2 year lull in recovery. I was kind of falling out of love with the 12-step thing, for no other reason really than I was just trying to expand my horizons in recovery. It felt limiting for whatever reason at that point in my life. Um, I had some social disagreements with some folks in the community, and just all kinds of things manifested to helping me focus more on peer support, and that introduced me to other forms of recovery dharma, more spirituality, different kinds of recovery groups that I started to get involved in, which I think in the long run has helped me maintain a stronger foundation. More legs on my table is what I like to say. If I have one leg on my table, it's a pretty shoddy table. If I have more legs on my table, which is my analogy for recovery, then I'm feeling pretty stable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So it's like adding tools to your tool pouch,
yeah,
right? I
exactly.
mean, yeah, you're gaining more experience, and it's also giving you more strength
Totally.
and more self-love, I would think, to be able to stay on the path that you're going. And I don't know if I'm 100% correct on this. From what I've seen on my experience, especially being on the other end and watching somebody go through, it's almost that love and that respect. And you did touch base on it just a little bit earlier in the show. That love and respect for oneself is not there.
Yeah.
And you can go to all kinds of recovery centers, and there may be one that finally fits for you, and you're starting to go. And you mentioned white knuckling. I believe so many individuals out there, they really do believe they can do it on their own. I know the one that I was speaking about before we started recording,
Yeah.
that's how she thought too. It's just, I can do this. I don't need to go to meetings. I got this. And it's crazy being on the other side where you're seeing them climb this mountain, and they're just going like crazy, and they're doing so amazing that it's almost like they get in that loose rock where
Mhm.
your feet are going as fast as they can, but you're actually going backwards more than you're going forward. And before you
Yeah.
realize it, they're back down at the bottom again. And
Yeah.
not having that support and not having those tools and not using those tools, man, it's just, I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around it when somebody works so freaking hard to get to a better place in their life, just to turn around and give it all back up
Yeah.
because they're so hard-headed in thinking that they've got it. When in all reality, none of us have it, whether we're in recovery or not.
Yeah.
None of us have it. I mean, I can fall back into my old patterns that I've been working my ass off to get out of for the past 15 years. You can go
Totally.
back to them a hell of a lot quicker than you can get out of them.
It's true. It's true. It's a great
So you,
point.
so you just got to keep pushing no matter what that takes.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because that's been a huge part of my recovery. I've had these phases of doing exactly that, of kind of falling back into, um, for me, it's always manifested as like extreme drive towards career and education and like achieving things. That was me in my chef career as well. I was dedicated to achieving things, these external things, right? That every time I achieved those things, like I said, I was very successful in my chef career. I got one of the symbols is like your name on your jacket, embroidered on your jacket when you're a chef, right? You've kind of made it.
Mhm.
I got that. And the ultimate experience was like, what the hell did I do all this for my name on my, like, what does it matter? You know what I mean? Because it's just a thing. It's a job that you can love and enjoy, but it's just an external thing. And that's been a theme throughout my entire life in my recovery, even to this day. And I'll talk about that more in a second. But I've had these periods of just kind of banging my head on the wall for a while, um, and then coming back to reality around what's really important. And what I'm really grateful for is that banging my head on the wall hasn't had to mean for me falling all the way back, down the hill, as you said. I've been able to maintain my recovery for 6.5 years now, while at times banging my head on that wall and just making poor choices and isolating. And I still to this day experience pretty moderate to severe symptoms of anxiety and depression at times too, which complicates my substance use recovery for sure. And so the difference for me for sure, like even just this last, I'll kind of finish out the story a little bit. I was going to school. I got my bachelor's degree at Weber State in social work, which was really cool. Still working at Davis. And I ended up going to get my master's degree online at a university out of New York called Columbia University. And I had this period at the end of my bachelor's degree where I was all in person, work, in person school, in person internships. And overnight, I went to online school. I changed jobs to where I work now, which is kind of hybrid, very small organization, not a ton of in-person office engagement and online internship. And so as an introvert, I went from being incredibly socially surrounded with recovery all day, every day, to being very socially isolated. And as an introvert, I kind of thought that would be a good thing. And in some ways it was, but in most ways it wasn't. I graduated four months ago. And in some ways, the last 4 months have been some of the hardest of my recovery. Like I'm still just barely coming out of a really rough patch in my recovery, in my mental health specifically. And just to speak to your point, I kind of allowed myself to focus so much. I was in work full time, school full time, extremely successful at all of those things, but miserable on the back end. And I think the overarching message of that for me as a person in recovery is that I tend to focus on external things when I don't want to look at myself and the things that I'm feeling and going through. They're a very good distraction because the world rewards you for it. They hype you up for being successful in those kinds of things. But most of the world isn't there to pick you up when you're isolated and alone in your house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the thing that I'm most grateful for, though, is that when I have made those mistakes and choices, I've been able to bounce back because throughout my recovery, even during those rough periods, I've been surrounded by incredible friends, incredible people that have stuck by me. My family, who I mentioned a lot earlier, having challenging relationships with, I have beautiful relationships with now. I've been able to heal and repair those. And even when I think I have it for a little while, they let me know that I don't, and they'll let me, trip over my own feet for a little while just to make the mistake. But I am surrounded by support, and because of that, I'm coming out of that rough period, even just as recently as a couple of weeks ago, of really struggling, and doing much better. It's still a process, as we all know, but yeah, it's been.
You said the key word. It's that process.
Yeah.
And something just came to me about with what you were sharing. Life seems to be like an energy drink.
Okay.
A very powerful energy drink. I don't drink like Red Bull or Monsters and all that stuff because I get really sick to my stomach. I get really jittery, flush. But those who take those the energy drinks, you have all that bang and you're just going. And it's proof. It's been scientific proof that when humans feel their best, they do their best.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's a certain point in the day when that energy drink runs out and we crash.
Oh yeah.
And life just has a way of doing that to us, right? I also like to say it has a way of throwing shit balls at us. We'll dodge them for a while, but eventually we're going to catch one in the face.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you have that support, and here you said even after 6 years, there's still times, right? There's still times it catches you off guard.
Yeah.
But to have that support and also to have the tools that you have to be able to go, okay, I'm going to allow myself to go through whatever these feelings are. However, I'm going to do everything I can not to get stuck there because I know where that's going to take me.
Yeah.
And having that support to basically let the ladder down into the cesspool and say, hey, one run at a time, right? Let's help you out of here and we'll get rocking and rolling again. It's so amazing. And gosh, again, it just breaks my heart it just breaks my heart when individuals, that addiction has just got a hold of them so freaking deep,
Yeah.
so hard. I like to say it like the eagle talons, they're so sharp. And I mean, an eagle can pick up something half its weight, if not more, and fly off with it. And it's those
Mhm.
talons. It's just their legs, just these claws that are holding onto this thing.
Yeah.
But it's still the strength of the wings. But gosh, it just gets a hold of so many people, and
Yeah.
just it's so hard for them to let that go. And also, I think the fear of
Yeah.
letting it go, right? Because that's your crutch for such a long time. I mean, my cocaine and alcohol use every weekend for 8 years now, and that was my release of a stressful job, or so I
Mm.
told myself at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's crazy. It's just crazy how it grabs a hold of us, and if it affects us so many ways. Even those of us on the other side.
Mhm.
There are some things that you've said during your story where I feel my triggers coming up.
Yeah.
Just because my subconscious mind is kicking in these memories, and I'm
Yeah.
going, "Holy cow, okay, well, let's get rid of this one again,"
Sure.
let's go
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, and I think the tricky thing with, addiction recovery specifically is that substances are so good at what they do, right? Like as a teenager, they really served a significant purpose for me, and they did their job really well. And that's why they get their hooks so deep into, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, they do the job so well. For me, they were allowing me to kind of lubricate my social life. I was finally able to make large groups of friends, talk to the girls I wanted to talk to, and all those things you want as a teenager. Um, and finally loosen up. Like I'm a really tightly wound person. I'm a highly anxious person still to this day. And it's really hard for me to relax. And so alcohol, will always be enticing for me for that reason, because it's great at helping you relax. Um, and I think that's where the traps lie. That's where the talons are, right? It's just they do the job so well that if I'm feeling some type of way, that's always going to be something that I know will work, and it will work in that moment, and that's the draw. The unfortunate reality for many of us that I've talked to in addiction recovery is that it works for that moment, and then the consequences come, whether it's physical and how I feel the next day, whether it's legal and criminal justice, or it's social and emotional and just how I feel, or some combination of all of those things. Um, Eventually that other shoe is going to drop of my decision to do that. And throughout my recovery, after the first couple of years, I haven't necessarily practiced abstinence-based recovery. I've utilized medical cannabis. I have drank at times, and I don't consider that to be an end to my recovery. I consider that to be some of these like learning opportunities where, again, I was smacking my head against the wall, and it was very short and it was brief. And because of my recovery capital, the things in my life that build up my recovery, I truly believe that those are the reasons that those experiences, um, in that moment, they served a purpose. I learned from it and had some consequence to it, and move forward with my recovery. And that's why for me, I don't consider that to be, I ended my recovery days, or
Yeah,
any of those kind of things for sure. I really have just tried to bounce back, learn from those experiences. And really, for me, my addiction recovery has had very little to do with substances. It's really been more about my mental health. My mental health is what drives me to the substance. If I'm not taking care of myself, my anxiety, and when I get into a really dark place, my depression, those are the things that cause me to cope. And so for me, it's really more about taking care of myself on a day-to-day basis. And like I said earlier, at times I haven't done that. And so it is easy to fall into those traps for me. And
yeah,
yeah, even just recently, like I said, I had to learn that lesson again, and I'm grateful for him each time, because I bounce back a little bit stronger. And fortunately, to this point, I don't ever like playing with fire like that, of course, but um, I think that because of what I have around me and the people that I have around me, I'm able to learn from it each time, and whether a substance is involved or not. Like I've really had a really strong recovery over the last 6.5 years that I'm grateful for. And um, I get to work in it, right? I can talk a little bit more about work, but I get to be fully immersed in it in so many different ways, and it's a really beautiful thing. Yeah.
You know, and good for you, and congratulations on where you have taken yourself so far. You know, and I know your journey is going to continue, and you're going to continue to do amazing. And it is nuts because I have also learned being in the recovery community, we're very good at supporting one another, but we're also very good at making others feel like, well, you just failed,
Yeah.
right? Because of the certain
Totally.
belief systems. And one thing that I have picked up, and this is just how I like to translate it, is everyone's journey is their own journey. Their
Totally.
story is their story. You know, I've had people ask me if I looked at myself as an addict because I did cocaine and alcohol every Friday and Saturday night for an 8-year stretch. I
Mhm.
never looked at myself as an addict.
Yeah.
I've said, okay, yes, I have been. And then I've said, no, I wasn't. And then I'm like, yes, I have. Then I'm like, no, I wasn't. And then
Totally.
finally I was sitting down talking with somebody who's been through the programs and everything. And they're like, Ellis, your journey, it's your story.
Yeah.
How is it that it's how you see it inside you? What, and that's all that
Yeah.
matters. And I've heard other guests on my show basically kind of say the same thing, like what you just did, right?
Yeah.
It's your journey. Who am I to say that, no, you got to start at day one again?
Yeah.
It's not. It's your journey, your story, your path. If it's working for you and you're learning and you're building from it, man, that's all that matters in my eyes. That's just
Yeah.
my version. As long as you are continuously to move forward and you're not going backwards, even if you only move that far, you still went that far.
For sure. I love that. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that with me. I mean, I think it's a definitely very similar way in how I try to view it too, with the people in recovery that I'm involved in their lives, right? As friends or and for myself. Like I think we're all just out here trying to live a good life after having a really, really hard time.
Yeah.
Self-inflicted or not. Like life is really hard and complicated. And I think that that kind of leads into one of the main points I wanted to make is that for me, like recovery is not at all about having this amazing life of peace and serenity, that sometimes can be uh, hyped up in some circles, in a lot of circles in recovery. But for me, that's really a misnomer. I think that, and I don't think I'm unique in this, that recovery for me has been incredibly freaking hard um, a lot of the time. And a lot of that is because of my mental health and the things that I experience. And not everybody experiences those things for sure. But I think that life is just challenging and it's more challenging for some than for others, substances or not. Right. And I think that for me, recovery has been a lot more about writing out the really difficult times than it has been this incredible, every moment is joy and peace experience. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I think there's real beauty in that because I think that's the reality for many people, either in recovery or trying to find recovery, is that I know early on I got sold this image that life is great and it's beautiful. You hear the beautiful recovery stories, and that's also true. I've had those experiences as well, but it's really been this fluctuation of beauty and incredible relationships and support and incredible experiences. I've got to travel and see the world and just all the beautiful things about recovery for sure. And I've also been alone in my house and really in a bad place, um, and contemplating things I shouldn't be contemplating, right? And then having to reach out to those supports to get myself back on my feet. And so it's both things, and I think it's really important to anytime I use my story to highlight both because life is really hard for a lot of people, and sobriety isn't going to fix that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I think the message is that sure it's hard, but it's also still worth it. It's also still worth building up the supports and whatever it is, doing the 12-step meetings, going to therapy, residential treatment, peer support, like whatever the case may be, harm reduction and medication assisted treatment, like all the different opportunities we have to find recovery, all those things are still worth it, even though we know it's going to be hard. And for me as a peer support, I get to tell a person, yeah, it sucks at times. Early recovery is really hard. It's really hard. And I'm going to be here with you every step of the way. Um, because someone was there for me,
Yeah.
you know?
I've used this analogy quite a few times in the show. when we reach our adult years, how quickly we give up on a lot of things,
Mhm.
and society's tough on us nowadays. I mean, you're not allowed to show emotions, because if you are, you're weak. And I think that's why suicide rates going up, and so many people are falling to substances, or gambling, or porn, or whatever it is, eating,
Totally.
shopping, working out. There's so many of them. you know when we're little babies, and we're learning, we learn how to roll over, and then before you know it, we learn how to get on all fours, and then before you know it, we're crawling, and during all this time, when we're learning to stand up on our own 2 feet and walk, and then finally run, we're falling, we're bumping ourselves, we're splitting our lips open, knocking teeth out, we're doing so many crazy things, but not once. And of course, our brains are made not to remember that far back. However, I don't ever remember telling myself, man, I just took a chunk out of my chin because I was trying to stand up and walk. I'm not doing this again. I think I'll just sit on my ass and crawl the rest of my life. We continue to go. However, as we get into our adult years, and yes, the pressure is on us a heck of a lot more, but how quickly we give up and say, I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to smoke myself to death or drink myself to death, because why go forward?
Yeah.
And it's crazy how our minds will switch so quickly, and of course, whatever it is that we're battling with, like you said earlier, it just has a hold on us, and it doesn't, it's a tough one to let go of. I was told by my ex once, I love ice cream. I just love
Me
ice
too.
cream. You put ice cream
Me
in front of me, I'll eat the whole freaking court in one
too.
sitting. I don't care. My
Totally.
excuse is I'll work it off tomorrow at the gym.
For sure.
you know, um, but she told me once, she goes, "What if I told you you could never have ice cream ever again the rest of your life?" And she goes, "That's how it feels like for me thinking I cannot ever drink again the rest of my life, even to sit down and have one, because I know I cannot have one."
Yeah.
And my comment at that time was, it's not the same, but really it is. It is the same.
Yeah.
It would be a struggle for me not to ever have ice cream again, even though ice cream could, if I really indulged in it as much as I probably could, it could cause health issues and
Oh, totally.
and all kinds of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's still the same thing. So I'm hoping some of these listeners that listen to the show, whether you have battled addiction or have a family member, even whether you don't, find something that you really love and enjoy,
Yeah.
and tell yourself you can no longer do that. Just it's out of your life completely. How
Mhm.
hard would that be for you? And that's how hard it is for individuals who are working their butts off to stay away from something that destroyed their life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's it's really just it's an interesting life being in recovery, that there's always, at least early on in my recovery, I always felt like there was this threat looming over me. You know what I mean? Like I was waiting for the other foot to drop, that I was going to relapse and I was going to ruin all this stuff. Um, and I've realized more and more over time that I think with all of the work that I've done, all of the things that I've built into my recovery and into my life, I have a pretty strong insurance policy. I mean, even like if I bang my head against the wall for a while, um, and even if I make poor decisions, like I have the insurance, quote unquote, right? The old analogy of paying into your insurance policy every day in recovery. Um, I have the things in my life to lift me up and keep me safe. And so I think that's definitely a message that I like to share, is that like for a lot of folks in recovery, regardless of a day, a month, 10 years, or 50, like if you have a bad go of it for a while, whether that means a return to use for a week, whether that means you end up hospitalized for your mental health, like for me, it's so important to recognize and acknowledge that recovery doesn't stop there. You didn't lose anything. You have every experience you had before that, every piece of knowledge, every skill, none of that was lost. And you can pick up, like you said earlier, you can pick up right there and have the most incredible rest of your life. And who knows, in 5 years, you end up hospitalized again or have another return to use. Like, it's not to undermine the importance of those events. Those can be very damaging to your life. Of course, they can spiral and they can get so out of control. That's really important to, of course, try to maintain and avoid those things. But it's just to say that if you fall down, like you said earlier, you have to get back up. Like, you still have all of the things that got you to that point. For me, when I've had those experiences, I still have my family. I still have all my wonderful friendships that I can call just about any time, day or night. I can go to coffee with. I can go do some activity with. Like, I have so much support that even when I get too smart for my own good, because that's what it comes down to for me. I think I got it. I think I've got it figured out. I'm so able to maintain this thing. I know they're going to be there for me, just like I would be there for them, for my support system that is in recovery, you know, or not. Like,
Yeah.
it's just so important to know that, like I said earlier, life is really, really hard sometimes. And it's important to know that recovery goes on. Like, if we want it to, if we want to pick it back up and keep going with it, we certainly can. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about where you're at now. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
they abbreviated UPS, correct, for Utah Support?
UPN.
UPN. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So now, after I finished school and all that, I'm at Utah Peer Network. I'm our executive director. I've been here for a year and a half now. We're a brand new, super tiny nonprofit. Actually, just this morning, got our letter from the IRS that we got our 501c3 status approved. So that's a huge deal for us.
Congrats. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. We've kind of been operating under another organization for a while, but this is going to open up doors for us for funding and those kind of things. Anyway, I've been here. Our organization is really a statewide workforce support organization. So we were created to help kind of organize and create infrastructure around the peer support specialist workforce. We do a lot of advocacy. We sit on a lot of the state and local, like, councils, committees, things like that, to advocate. We help individuals that are in their, you know, early, mid, like, long-term recovery process that want to become a peer specialist. We help them navigate the certification process that at times can be lengthy and challenging. And then we help them find jobs and things like that as well. And then from there, the other kind of big overarching thing that we do is to help organize the workforce is in every region of Utah that we've kind of split up based on what they tell us. We have what we call a regional network meeting. So in each community, we're trying to bring people together in the peer specialist workforce or interested in peer support. We're trying to bring them together to talk to each other because that wasn't happening before, right? My experience as a peer specialist early on was I had a good team around me in my organization of 5 or 6 people, but I didn't really talk to anyone else outside of that organization that were peer support unless they were my friends already. And so anyway, we're bringing people together to talk about the rewards of peer work, the challenges of peer work, which there are many challenges in peer work, and many rewards too. So we do that in Salt Lake County, in northern Utah, kind of Davis, Weber, Cache, southern Utah, St. George area, and then Utah County. And we're trying to go to the other, like, more central, rural, northeastern areas as well. Ultimately, to kind of connect all those regions to a statewide meeting where everyone can talk to each other and we can kind of get everyone communicating kind of on the same page as a workforce and understanding what the biggest needs are when we, you know, go advocate at the Capitol or whatever else we need to do to change the broader system. Our main focus is really the overall system of peer support in Utah, which is very broad and a lot of work to do for sure. But there's also other organizations, so many other amazing people out there sharing in that work too. And so, yeah, it's been a really hard, rewarding and just amazing experience at the same time. Just like I talked about earlier with life, like, it's been a microcosm of that. I've really struggled doing this work, and I've really loved it at the same time too. You know, it's just the nature of nonprofit work, I think, is very challenging there's always the threat that we're going to run out of grant funding and money, and I won't have a job anymore, and just a lot of the challenges of those kinds of things. But
Yeah.
we get to work with so many beautiful people doing beautiful work throughout the state of Utah in peer support that kind of, of course, more than balances all the challenges out for sure. I've really loved it, and so yeah.
Well, and look at what you're being a part of,
Yeah.
something new that's growing. And, I my version of it is, I think you guys are going to continue to grow, that you will see
Oh,
it continue to spread throughout the state. And whether you stay there or not, just to be able to go back, Brayden, and say, I was a part of this. I was a part of this to help get it to where it is today. Because whether you're still there or not, all the work that you put in is still helping others that are coming into that organization. And what a great thing to be a part of.
yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, kind of the overarching theme of my contributions to our conversation anyway, of there being kind of good and struggle and bad and all things mixed in is, like you said, it's at the end of the day for me, all that being said, the reason I'm still here, like alive as a human being, is because the good always outweighs the challenges, right? As severe as those things have been for me at times, um, I've always come back to all the incredible things that I have in my life, and that extends to my professional life here too. Like, it's um, I come from my last job was like 40 hours in the office, like large bureaucratic organization with lots of rules and structure. And overnight, I went to a staff of two in a nonprofit organization that didn't have an office for the first 4 months, and it was just like a harsh uh, jump to the other end of the spectrum of like what a work life can look like. And I really struggled with that early on. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It was
I
so
bet.
different. It was such like jumping into an ice bath when you've never done it before. Um, but I had a lot of support. Our original director, Lisa Walker, really helped me navigate kind of figuring that out for myself and if it was going to work for me. And I've really gotten to be more used to that aspect of the work. And there's a lot of benefits to that flexibility, and I can, set my own schedule and, all those kinds of things. So I've gotten to see the good in it when I originally saw the bad. I mean, I think my brain, for whatever reason, is wired to always recognize the bad first. And, um, that's to keep me safe, right? It
Hmm.
came from throughout my life. I had to do that to survive. And I, at times, struggled to like turn that off, but like I said, I have good people in my corner that have really helped me get through that when it rears its ugly head again. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's definitely, like we said earlier, a learning process for sure. So
Well, and being involved with what you're in, and even with what I do, I find it very, very rewarding and also very educational. It's helping me in my life as well to become a better person, so much better person. I mean, the
yeah,
person I was 15 years ago, probably the people that know me now wouldn't like me at all. Because
sure.
I was just a liar and a manipulator just to get whatever I wanted to get. I was going to do whatever it took to get what I wanted. And to be able to go through what I've gone through in my life, which so many others have gone through a hell of a lot worse by a long shot, but to still be able to come out on top. And I call it on top is because they're not in that dark hole anymore.
Yeah.
Even though it'll open up, it's like a different portal. Every once in a while that different portal will open up and it's trying to tempt you to walk back in it, and you got to do everything you can to stay away from it.
Yeah.
But I believe that, yeah, we all get on top and we continue this journey, and it just gets stronger. There's so
Yeah.
many cool things that's going on out there in our community, and Utah really is probably one of the best community recoveries or recovery communities that's out there.
Yeah.
Now I could be biased saying that because I've not lived in other states to see.
Sure.
However, I've interviewed a lot of people from out of state, and they've shared a lot of stuff that they go through, and quite a few of them are like, "Holy cow! I had no idea
Yeah.
Utah was like that."
Yeah.
I think we are a little different.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would definitely say the same. I think, especially around the Salt Lake Valley, there's so many resources, so many people in recovery that are connected and talking to each other and stuff like that. I mean, I think I've never lived in the rural areas of Utah, but I have talked to a lot of folks in my work and that say there's a lot more challenges there. Of course, there's less resources, less connection, less recovery uh, resources. So I can only imagine that that's tough. But I think Utah, by and large, with all the things that we're trying to do, especially to support all of our communities, is a really beautiful thing. And I've not lived outside of Utah either, but I've heard the same that you know, in a lot of different ways, both professionally, like in treatment and recovery and things like that, we're doing a lot of cool stuff. Um, we have this, like, I don't know if you heard about the new Behavioral Health Commission that they just passed last legislative session, but
Mm-mm.
um, so I'm sure it's a long story, but anyway, they did a big research project to identify the gaps in our behavioral health system. And it was a lot of the big heavy hitters, all the hospital association, and all these big people did this project and created what they call the Utah Behavioral Health Master Plan. It's like a 65-page document that just fully details everything that they found that could be improved with our behavioral health system, both in the private sector, the nonprofit, like hospitals, everything. Um, they used that to advocate for this new policy last year, which is called the Behavioral Health Commission, and it's really cool. It's pretty innovative in that essentially, like if you imagine the legislature at the top, right underneath that is this behavioral health commission that's made up of 11 people from all over Utah, from all different sectors, both nonprofit, hospitals, local mental health authority, like treatment centers, all the different things are covered. And the most beautiful part about this, and kind of to circle back to peer support, is that 3 of those seats out of the 11, so like 30, whatever that is, 30 something percent, are specifically named for people with different forms of lived experience, substance use, mental health, and then a family member of someone that's gone through mental health or substance use challenges. And so 30% of this big, like, body that's going to oversee a lot of like mental health and substance use policy in Utah, 30% of that voice is the voice of lived experience of us, of peer supportive people that have had these challenges. And that's a really beautiful thing. But just to speak to your point, like Utah's really doing some cool stuff. And like, that's hopefully it's brand new. They're still kind of figuring out what that looks like, but just as an example of something cool that Utah's doing, that's a great example because the folks that they've selected for those seats are incredible advocates. Evan Doan from USARA, Julie Hartle, who worked with Optum United Healthcare for a long time. And then I don't know the family member, Ali Isom, very much personally, as much as I do the others, but I've heard incredible things about that. So anyway, just to say, Utah is doing some cool things, even all the way up at the legislature. Utah has this, reputation as being very conservative, and we still get to and are doing so many incredible things in supporting people. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there. It came to mind. So
No, I'm glad you did. Thank you so much because I did not hear that, and I know Evans. Gosh, that guy works on so many different things, and he's
he's
up there
amazing.
legislating a ton.
Yeah,
Which is really really good to see, and they're huge supporters of our Healing Utah Success Summit. You guys, thank you very much, are supporters
totally.
of our Healing Utah Success Summit, and it is really neat to see the growth that's happening in our community, and I really do believe that we are really starting to see a difference. I think we're really starting to notice that we're not spinning in the mud anymore. We're finally starting to get some traction and going some good places. And it's good to know too that we've got people who are in certain positions in our community that can help us get to where we need to go to make a bigger difference. Because again, that's what it takes, right? I mean, it takes a plethora
Yeah,
of us. However, it also does take God to put certain people in the right spot to help us
yeah.
get through the next door. That's for sure.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think, like I said, it takes all of us working together, and I think that's in my job, what I've learned the most is that none of us can do any of this kind of work alone. Whether you're working directly with people as a therapist or a peer support specialist, whether you're working all the way at those high levels of legislation, like we all need our group, our people, that are in our corner and we're in theirs. to really ride out, like I said, the challenging times, and those will always come, and we get to tackle those sometimes with a smile on our face if we got the right group of people around us, and it can really be a beautiful thing to be in recovery personally, and professionally as well. I mean, there's just so many good people, and that's been one of the coolest parts of this job is I travel all over the state. I talk to so many people that I never would have met, that are doing recovery in St. George, in Cedar City, in Provo, in Tooele, coming from me and my background up in northern Utah, and Layton is where I grew up. If I didn't mention that, it's been so cool to see so many aspects of recovery that I had never been exposed to, just so many cool things.
I love it.
Yeah.
My gosh, Brayden, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
It's amazing how quick an hour goes past. I mean, we're like 1 minute away from an hour.
Nice.
Just before we end it here, what does the other side of addiction mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the other side of addiction sounds like for me, at one point in my life, the image of a wall is coming up, right? There was this wall that I couldn't climb over, and that was my mental health and my addiction, in those earlier years that I had talked about. Um, and for years and years and years, kind of came full circle with me saying I was banging my head on the wall earlier, right? Like I just kept doing that and doing that and doing that. Um, Not seeing any way around it, not seeing any way over it. And it really comes down to for me that I was trying to do it myself. I was trying to climb this unclimbable wall by myself. And in order to get to the other side of addiction, the other side of that wall, I had to allow people in. I had to let them support me, which I, for so many different reasons, was not able or willing to do before. And that moment that I shared, where I finally had the spiritual moment of just wanting to be done finally, I finally allowed my family in, and they took me to a place where I could find help. I finally started to find friends and people in recovery that could guide me as mentors and as peers, people that could show me the way. And then fortunately, they helped me over that wall, over to the other side, and I've been able to hopefully do the same for some others, and continue to help other people myself, um, and just, yeah, join this community of people in recovery. So anyway, that kind of image came to mind when you asked the question. So yeah, hopefully that sounded good.
It sounded awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing that. I really do appreciate it, because it seems like whenever I do ask that question, the majority of the guests, it's all different, right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's all different how we see it. So again, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for all your support, for everything that you do out there in community. And if there's anything, you guys got something coming up, or something big and you guys want to promote or whatever, please feel free to reach out, because again,
Totally.
this platform is for things like that, to help build the community, and to
Yeah.
help spread words. So know that the other side of addiction is here for you guys as well.
I love that. Yeah. Same. I'm super excited for the summit. I haven't ever been before, so I'm super excited to see what y'all are up to with that, and just grateful to be here and talking with you, Al. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. And yeah, gosh, guys, with Brayden talking about that summit, I wanted to mention that at the closing of this. Mark your calendars for Saturday, October 5th at the Miller Free Enterprise in Sandy, Utah, from 10:30 to about 3:30. We've got an amazing event coming up. We believe that is probably the best addiction recovery event in the Valley. This is our fourth one. This one is going to blow your socks off. I mean, we've had people come to all three of them. Those that have, get ready for a whole new experience. This thing's going to be killer. We've got some amazing speakers. We've got the most speakers we've ever had. Each speaker has about 20 to 30 minutes to touch on a subject, whether it's suicide, addiction recovery, domestic violence, and also the victim mentality. So you guys, it's going to be amazing. You can get your tickets at Ruesch, Ruesch, recovery.com, or reach out to me, find me at Mr. Al Richards at gmail.com. Shoot me an email and I'll help you on getting tickets. But guys, Yeah, we're all excited, man. It's 2 months, a little less than 2 months, and we're getting stoked. We're really excited about it. Thank you again to all our guests, all our past guests, our listeners, guys. You guys are the ones that are making this possible, and just we love and appreciate your support. And remember this: addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.